Hi everyone, welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. Delighted for a second time to be peering into the creative space of Geof Isherwood. Jeff, thank you for jumping in and talking with me.
Oh, well, thanks for the invitation.
Absolutely, anytime, anytime. I know we're talking comics, I know we're talking film, maybe a little bit too. And my first question was going to be something along the lines of what's new in your creating? And I know there's something new because you were just working on it as I was signing in with you.
Yes, I'm working on a two-part black and white story of Conan for Savage Sword of Conan, which is being published by Titan.
Hmm. Hmm.
Now, so the first issue is drawn. Now I'm jumping into the second one. And the best part of all of this was I had just been out to San Diego, went with Amanda. And so we had a little bit of time there first. And then at the convention, we're able to meet the people at Heroic Signatures who are holding the rights to the Robert E. Howard material right now, and they're also handling the editorial side. So they're creating, or they're hiring and editing and everything, all the creative work, and they
Cool.
hand off the finished product to Titan, who then prints it and distributes it. So that's the model that they've decided to go by for now.
Nice, nice. You of course have a history with the Conan character, and you were talking about you were roughing, and then you said the next part in your process was using that light box behind you to go in and sort of do the next iteration.
That's right. Yes. What I do first is I rough out the story digitally, and then I can play around with it more. Um, but what that means is, well, once I get to the light box, I can draw the thing cleaner to start with, so there's not just graphite all over the place. And if I feel like changing my mind, well, the first 48-page story, I have to say that I roughed the whole thing out in like 4.5 days, the 48 pages. It's pretty
Wow.
much the pace I used to do when I would pencil a regular 22-page comic. I'd do like rough out about 11 pages a day, something like that. And, but then, like a month and a half later, when I'd get around to inking the later pages, I would find different angles and different, you know, yeah, mostly camera angles, maybe a
Hmm.
little bit of the acting, but that was pretty much set up. But I just changed how I thought the story would look to make it play better, just to read better. So I wound up changing a lot, when it came down to it. And but still, I kind of like this method. And sometimes if I have reference material, then I can also add that in first. It's a little
Hmm.
easier just to drop that in on the pencils, the digital pencil stage. But I'm finding that I don't have to go overboard with the digital pencils first. I can pretty much save time by going through a first pass of just roughly blocking in where everything is, and then I can go over it one more time just to give myself a bit of structure. And then after that, I'll just lightbox and I can finish the drawings from there. Because the thing with a Conan story is almost every panel is going to have background because you have to show the world quite regularly. Anyway,
Hmm.
I feel you should, just to keep readers involved in knowing where they are. So also these stories often have a lot of different characters, and so panels can get kind of crowded as well. And that's something I have to watch out for so it doesn't look too dense. But at the same time, there are, quite a number of characters in there. So I have to make sure everybody has their place. That takes a bit more thought to put together in the first place, and of course takes more time to draw. So it's just a process where I'm, as usual, just finding ways to be more efficient if I can.
Yeah, yeah. Love the process. Love hearing about that, and it's really telling if folks sort of just assume that things appear on the page. There is indeed a multiple step process for everything that's there.
Yeah, everybody sees the final 10% of the thought process that went into doing it, but there's so much that comes first. And a lot of times readers say, well, I don't like that camera angle. I don't like this. But what you don't think about is the fact that I or the an artist may have already tried 5 or 6 other things and decided against them
Mhm,
for a
mhm,
variety of reasons. So what I try to do is via my erstwhile script, right?
mhm, mhm.
my little quick thumbnail of like how many, how to divide up the panels on the page. Um, and that even comes down to the action in the panel. Is it basically a horizontal idea or is it vertical? And
Mhm.
based on that, like very simple idea of how to even start the thing, I try to design the page layout. And also, usually in one page, there's one panel that kind of stands out. It's the sort of the hero panel or the big action or something, or that big face or something. So you have to be careful not to cram out, take up all the space. And then that big major panel, it's this little thing like this. You want to,
Yeah,
that's why you have to see the whole page as a whole. Of course, you have to see it as a whole first, and then you decide how to shrink or enlarge certain areas. And that's what's nice about doing the digital part is that it's very easy to do that digitally, whereas having to just erase everything and draw it all over again, larger or smaller, just takes more time, and your paper starts to get messy,
yeah,
starts
yeah.
to get dirty with graphite everywhere. So um, I typically will draw everything a little too big, and then I check out the word balloon placement and realize it's got to go here, here, and here. So a big panel like this with balloons, now I've only got this much space to draw in, right? So then
Mm-hmm.
so if you see the artwork, and this is something that's true these days since so much work is lettered digitally, people looking at original art will see all these big gaps and open spaces because we have to leave room for all the lettering. It's just you don't see it yet.
Yeah, yeah. That makes sense and definitely part of the process. You were talking about sort of the camera angles, and it's interesting because I also know that you're a person who works in film and production design, storyboard design, prop design. So it sounds like those two worlds sort of influence each other to some degree.
Yes, well, of course, back when I was younger and really starting to read comics quite a bit in the early to mid 70s, the whole idea of cinematic sequences really took over in
Mm-hmm.
comics. That really became quite a popular thing to do. So, I was versed in it from the start. And so, therefore, the idea of doing the cinematic approach hasn't really changed. But what has happened in terms of working on films is that it's just given me a chance to think out what I'm drawing a little better and to hopefully draw things in storytelling terms a little more clearly.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
just and that's part of the thing too. For each shot description of 5 things, it comes down to what's going on, what do I have to feature, who's the character dealing with that, whatever the situation is. I have to find out what's the easiest way to show that in a very simple form first, and then I can build around it and hopefully keep the idea still pretty obvious to the reader and not clutter it up with too much complication if I have a crowd scene. So and of course there are lots of ways to do that, to block off something, foreground objects to background, and grouping of characters to make them like a single unit rather than just a bunch of random things scattered all over the place. It's That's part of the design element, but you do see this really in film as well. So it's the same kind of process and shot making. The I might have mentioned before, but the one thing about comics is compared to movies is that in film you just take all this, you shoot all the scenes, have a whole bunch of shots, and the editor actually makes the movie by piecing them all together, cutting them down to how long each take is going to appear in the film as a half second, 2 seconds, whatever.
Hmm.
But in comics, you do that first when you're
Hmm.
designing a page, and then it's only afterwards that you finish the drawings. But in film, they have to do all of that up front because it's filmed, right? So everything has to
Yeah.
look right up front, and then you just hope the performance works out and you can put it together. Comics, it's the opposite.
Yeah, yeah. No, we talked a good bit last time about some of the comics that you've worked on. Any particular moment in working on film where an idea has come through really well, something that's especially stood out that's translated well from your creative thinking about that?
Um, I'm not really sure because either one or the other, it's comes down to specific moments in the story, specific beats to draw, and I can't say offhand that I would say, well, this translates to that and vice versa. Film translates to comics and vice versa.
Hmm.
They are two different media, certainly, and the main difference I would say for storyboarding and seeing film compared to comics is you'll read a page in comics and it's 5 or 6 panels, but if you saw that same storytelling on film, you probably have 15 or 20 shots. There's a lot more that you can do with film because comics really is compressed a storytelling form. So there's a lot going on between panels that the reader has to fill in, right? I mean, that's kind of an old axiom of the medium. So simply because of limited page length and what have you, and you're trying to tell a certain amount of story, you could certainly go into more depth if you had time and page count.
Hmm.
You could tell a 20-page story in 100 pages. The same thing. You could really flesh it out and add all kinds of extra nuance and whatever. But after a while, it might seem kind of slow. That's the other thing. Or we're used to reading comics at a certain pace. So, and of course, it would just take so long to draw.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
we're kind of primed to read comics somewhat quickly. I think it's the whole medium is designed around being able to read through a story fairly quickly.
yeah. No, you've also worked as an educator and taught about the medium. So I imagine that's informed your work and informed your process in some way as well.
What it did do was force me to go back to basics and analyze the whole drawing process and the
Hmm.
thought process because I had to get that across to students. And it's not like I was teaching students that had no art background. They all did. But the point was to get them to be able to work efficiently because everything's deadline driven.
Hmm.
So, and that's of high importance. As you know, you can be a wonderful artist, but if you can't turn the work in on time, it's kind of meaningless. It doesn't help. And if you're doing film, it's even worse because if you need to get something ready to go on screen and it's not there by the day they're filming, it's not there. It's
Yeah,
just not going to appear at all. So you're out. So in comics and stuff, well, you can, and it's happened so often. It's a regular occurrence that publishers miss the printing date for a variety of reasons. But the problem with that is then you wind up paying for the time slot you were going to print, and then you pay again when you really do print.
hmm.
Get
Hmm.
charged twice. And that's just one problem, and you miss shipping, and then you miss, that's late. And everything just stacks up, and then you start having to go behind other people. You get further behind, and it's just a compounding problem. So in publishing, it's is a problem as well, especially financially.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Just thinking about titles that I know that have been delayed a few times, I imagine that that's a heavy hit on the publishing side.
And that's one thing Jim Shooter was really big on was getting Marvel titles back on schedule, and I think they were running like 40% of the books were late on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And so he managed to get everybody to catch up by doing things like lots of fill-in stories, things like that, just to slot in to allow every creative teams to have that extra month because they're already 3 or 4 weeks behind to catch
Yeah.
up. And the funny thing is, whenever I would get assigned a new comic, oh, by the way, Geof, we're 3 weeks late. Can you speed it up a little bit? So, it was always that. There was a rare occasion when I had plenty of time to draw something.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, you mentioned you're wearing the hat, and this was your first trip to Comic-Con, is that right?
That's right. Yeah, 42 years in the business and my first trip.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
was actually thanks to comic book dealer in Montreal, Georges Halac, who asked me to go out to be part of his setup. He has a very large uh, floor area, I would say. You can't just call it a booth because it's sizable. And he had four of us there, one in each corner of his setup as artists. So as Tim Vigil was there, Scott
Hmm.
Lobdell, and Sam De La Rosa, along with myself. So we each were at a corner and um, saw plenty of fans that way. So we were not in Artist Alley, but it was a different way of getting there. And so that's how we did it because apparently if you just want to get into the show, it's almost impossible. Like from what I understand,
Wow.
if you
Yeah.
have a spot, you don't want to give it up because you'll never see it again.
Wow. Yeah. I know it's a media driven sort of thing. So glad to hear that you were able to be there, and I hope to make it out there at some point as well.
Yeah, that said, with everything going on and with the Wolverine versus Deadpool or Deadpool versus Wolverine, whichever way it is, that
Hmm.
is premiering, and a lot of people went to see that. Uh, but primarily, the thing that I took from that was being able to meet the editorial team from Heroic.
Hmm.
They're based in Los Angeles, so I was able to meet my editors, but also the publisher and the people, other people in various roles. So it's going to. That was probably the best part of the whole trip, and so I would say the most important one to meet and get to know them and get to understand the setup a bit more because just saying getting a few talking on Zoom once or twice and having some emails back and forth, you don't necessarily understand the whole how it all is working because their working setup is a bit different. As I say, they are the ones handling the editorial side. So um, that was good, but also was able to meet Joe Jusko again there. He was
Hmm.
out
Hmm.
as he painted the cover for issue 5 of Savage Sword that I've drawn. So it was great to see him again. And some of the other artists that were there, Dan Panosium was there, Liam Sharp, some of the other people involved. Uh, Jim Zub, of course, the writer,
Hmm.
and the writer of the story I'm doing was there. Jason Aaron, he was there also. So we got a chance to meet in person, which doesn't always happen in
Yeah.
this business. Uh, Back at Heroes in June, I met Val Semix, who this was going back early 90s. This is like what 30, almost 34, 35 years ago. Val and I met for the first time in person this
Wow.
June in Heroes after drawing all these comics together all those years ago. So that's how the business is, you're not everybody's hanging around New York City like they used to.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, Different places, different spaces, but same passions, I guess.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. So again, West Coast crowd was out there, so there were people that I usually never get to see, um, were there as well. So overall, it was a great experience. Yeah.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. We started by talking about Conan, and we've made our way back around. Anything else that you'd like to mention about that project or any other projects before the last official question that's on the list?
Well, I'd say it seems to me that Rock and Titan are solidifying their relationship. A lot of these titles, they would officially say, "We're going to do this for a year and let's see how the sales look."
Mhm,
But
mhm,
um, Jim Zub apparently has been signed to like a 3-year contract, and one of the panels there was talking about the Howard verse,
mm,
like
mhm,
because people don't realize how many different characters he created and wrote stories about, and Conan was by far the most popular, but he wrote other characters and many more stories of, and so they're finding ways to tie everything together, and so certain stories will refer to other ones, and there are threads that can run through. So this all that's being put together a bit at a time. Jim Zub is dealing with that, so he's got a big job on his hands, but he's all
mhm,
excited about it, and um, so we're pretty much following along to see how that goes. But also, I'll see how it goes for me because I have a couple of stories, ideas also that I'm pitching out there. So um, hopefully that'll work out. I can't really say more at this point because nothing's approved.
mhm, mhm,
However, once this Conan story is finished, and well, I mean, I'll have final pitches sent in before then, but hopefully I'll be able to announce that I'll be doing more. And for me, the Conan stories that I've seen and drawing now are much heavier in tone. They're going also much much further into sorcery and having Conan. Some story like he dies and is resurrected and things like this. I mean, we never saw this in the past, right?
mhm,
And
mhm.
so they're pushing boundaries a lot more.
Yeah.
And what I want to do has more humor to it, I think, than what they're usually used to. Uh, things like uh, things like that to just make them really fun, entertaining stories to read. So, and also what I like to do is to toss in tidbits here and there as to why Conan is the way he is.
Mhm,
Why does he
mhm.
wear? Why did he have a bearskin, kilt kind of thing, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Why is he clean shaven most of the time? Little things like this, I kind of thought about and I go, yeah, what if I just toss that in there? Because so some of these questions were never really brought up or answered that I can think of. Of course, I haven't read everything, but um, yeah, just little things like that, and just stuff for fun, things like
Mhm.
that, just to bring again that angle to the character and what's going on, so that again it's a lot of it's familiar, but again it's still new, right?
Yeah, awesome. Also, you were talking about the Howard verse. I was just reading some Solomon Kane stories not too long ago. So there are a lot of characters and a lot of worlds that could definitely be part of that and hopefully will be.
Yeah, there were a couple of panels that were there. Titan had one, and Sarah Rosetta had another panel also, which she was showing off a new small Conan figurine. I guess they're going to have as a toy type of thing. But those things are, I think, available to be viewed by anybody now. I think they're out on in public. So, but the thing about the Conan stories, that it was Conan and the Black Stone, I think they call it.
Hmm.
That one gives a good overview about what's coming up. So it was good for me to hear too, and it just brought brought me further into understanding about, if I'm asked to draw other characters, I see how it all connects.
Well, looking forward to hearing those announcements and seeing more on the way. If folks out there want to connect with you and see the work, any particular places that they should go online or in person?
Well, let's see. My next appearance, unfortunately, I was supposed to be at another convention this past weekend in Chattanooga, but due to flight cancellations, I wasn't able to go.
Oh,
But I am going to the New York Con again this year, New York Comic Con. That's middle of October. And beyond that, well, we have our local show, of course, in Ottawa here. It's September 7th to 9th, I believe. And so that one I'll be at. Otherwise, beyond that, I'm not really sure yet. Also, based on the workload of drawing, I've kind of deliberately avoided booking anything else because Conan's just taking all my time to draw and try. I mean, I could knock it off and do a mess, but there's no way. Not after this being my first Conan work in 25 years.
yeah,
It's been
yeah,
a while. Yeah. So I want to make sure everybody really enjoys the comic and wants to come back for more. That's the main point.
absolutely, absolutely. Have we missed anything that you want to share before we close out?
Uh, that's pretty much it for now. Anything further down the road, it's a lot of it is just possibilities at the moment, so I don't have anything definite yet. So those will be announced when the time comes. Yeah,
Awesome,
when I
awesome.
get
Well,
something. As I say, I never count my chickens.
yeah, absolutely. Well, glad to have you back anytime, and many, many thanks for a wonderful second chat.
Yes, thank you, Jason. It's been great fun.